Tartaglia and Zhongli are getting their rerun, and naturally the big question is, should you get them? Here's the thing, I barely play Tartaglia these days, but on occasion I still actually play with Zhongli. We're here with Tartaglia and Masanori, and the thing about Tartaglia is that 99% of the time people play with Tartaglia with one team in mind, and that is of course going to be International, a team with one of the most boring characters in the game, but that's okay. We're going to be basically just quickly showing you how International works. This has already been talked about to death, so if you need some detail on how this works, you can go and have a look at like the 305,000 videos on International. I don't think I need to explain any further how this works. Crit! It didn't crit. In fact, it got blocked. But yeah, essentially International is a Zhongli Wave team, which allows Zhongli's Pyronado to do a lot of damage. That's basically the idea. Honestly, in my opinion, if you wanted to get Tartaglia to play a much more interesting team, there is one way that you could actually really hyper-focus on Tartaglia's strength, and that is to use him in a base Dory Hyper Bloom team. Like so. We're basically making so many Hyper Bloom seeds because we can. Gonna kill this one now. And then we kill these guys with all of the numbers just like that. Now, let's have a look at the other character who's also on the banner. His name is Zhongli. The thing about Zhongli is that he is a bit of an easier character to recommend and show off because he is, well, for starters, he is a shield. So a lot of people will play Zhongli for the shield alone. But what a lot of people often sort of overlook is that when you have his shield up, you also get like a really, really big sort of resistance shred that is very universal. That works even for elements that naturally can't be resistance shredded through the use of BB and shenanigans like that. For example, Geo and Animo. So that makes Zhongli a particularly good character in Geo teams as well. And then of course we have the alternative, which is that moment when you don't actually want to have a healer on the team. And that is often the case with HuTao. HuTao is a character who doesn't want to be actively healed, for the most part. So, what do we need? We're going to need Zhongli's shield. And so you can do a whole lot of damage with HuTao in a team where you have Zhongli's shield that also provides some resistance shred, even if we don't actually end up VVing the Pyro. So that's the main takeaway that I want people to have from this video, is that on occasion, Tartaglia's, quadratic scaling shenanigans does make him a generally more interesting character to play. Especially if you want to just have all those numbers that activate your armors. But in a much more general sense, Zhongli's big shield, as well as the universal resistance shred and all that jazz, does make him just an easier character to recommend, and also he is always going to be great for newer players and people who have skill issues. Nick? Now, I also wanted to just quickly go through how people would normally build these characters. This is going to be a bit of a rough sort of... I'm not going to go into too much detail for this particular guide on how to build these characters because they kind of have already been talked to death, but for newer players who are watching this video, hopefully this will give you some sort of an idea of what you want to look for. When it comes to weapons for both Tartaglia and Zhongli, here's the thing. Tartaglia basically uses any DPS bow in the game. The one that kind of stands out sometimes is Viridescent Hunt, which is a battle pass bow. You could potentially use it more over the other DPS bows in the game, mainly because of the vacuum effect that Viridescent Hunt provides, which allows you to group enemies a little bit better, which allows you to do more quadratic scaling shenanigans and more numbers on the screen. So that typically makes it a little bit more useful, but in a team like, for example, International, where enemies are going to probably get grouped up by Kaz or Sucrose, yeah, you don't really need to use Reruns at that particular point in time. Zhongli, on the other hand, can pretty much use most spears in the game with the possible exception of the EM spears like Italian Cross Spear because, well, at the present moment, EM on a Geo character doesn't really do anything, but maybe Navia might change that. We'll just have to see. Otherwise, newer players might want to consider just sticking with Black Tassel. It is a 3-star weapon on a 5-star character and an Archon on that, so I personally would never use it. But it is an option if you are just looking for a great big shield. Keep in mind, Zhongli is not the only shield option that exists in the game. We have a lot of ones now. Thoma, C4 Yanfei, Kirara, Layla, those are some options. And then of course we also have potential of some more characters that instead of like shielding you or healing you, just actively reduce the amount of damage that you take because they are actually taking some of that damage instead. I am of course specifically referring to Dahaya. Dahaya is also an option instead of Zhongli. And I personally sometimes play Dahaya in my HuTao team, so that way I can actually do some VV shredding as well. Now in terms of the artifacts for both Tartaglia and Zhongli, it's actually pretty straightforward as well. Tartaglia's options pretty much haven't changed all that much. There is Nymph's Dream, which is a newer artifact set that didn't exist when he last had his rerun. It basically allows you to have Polar Star without having to have Polar Star, so that could be pretty good. Otherwise, you could just stick with Heart of Depth or 2-piece Hydra, 2-piece Attack. I have heard from the grapevine that Heart of Death is probably not the best idea though for Tartaglia because of the fact that he does quite a lot of different attacks instead of, I think, just normal attacks or stuff like that. So maybe you might want to actually look at a Nymph Stream, but that is going to be deeper into Sumeru territory before you can actually start farming for Nymph Streams, so just keep that in mind. Heart of Death, on the other hand, is readily accessible for quite a lot of newer players. When it comes to Tartaglia's artifact substats, it's pretty much Attack, Hydra, Crit, just move on. You could potentially go EM, Hydra, Crit, I guess, if you want a slightly bigger nuke on Tartaglia's ult. That might actually be the play in International because you're playing Benny. But aside from that, yeah, I typically would just stick with Attack, Hydra, Crit. And then, of course, for Zhongli, his artifacts sets have pretty much not changed. It's 4-piece Tenacity all the way, and especially because 4-piece Tenacity is now available in the Artifact Strongbox, there really isn't a reason to go for anything other than that. I mean, I guess you could try and go for 2-piece Geo, 2-piece HP. Maybe that might give you a little bit more personal damage on Zhongli, but typically 4-piece Tenacity is still better because that also provides a damage buff for everyone else. And let's say, for example, in my Geo team, everyone does want to get that attack buff, so that's pretty good. Newer players would probably just stick to triple HP artifact stats. But if you find yourself getting better at the game, maybe you're getting better at dodging, maybe you're getting better at moving around, maybe you're playing characters that don't necessarily need to, you know, stay in the one spot all the damn time, perhaps you can consider transitioning towards a much more DPS-focused build, i.e. HP Geo Crit. That's what I'm trying to do. And the reason why I'm trying to do that is because Zhongli has a Meteor, and it's kind of hilarious that you're basically just dropping Meteors on enemies. I think you should do it. You'll hear other people say that his Meteor is absolutely useless, it's a DPS loss. I'm telling you that it's hilarious, you should do it. In a Geo team as well, keep in mind that the active character probably is going to have a lot of defense. Now, maybe that's not wrong, but we are talking about characters like Noel, Ito, and Albedo. They typically are built with quite a lot of defense. So at that point, Zhongli's shield kind of effectively becomes stronger because that's just how, you know, shields work. So having a lower HP shield in favor of having more DPS on Zhongli, not a bad idea in a Geo team in particular. And real quick, when it comes to Tartaglia and Zhongli's Constellations, they're not useful. I wouldn't bother with them at all. I have C1 Tartaglia by accident. I don't care about C1 Tartaglia. It doesn't really change anything. C2 Zhongli might be something that can make it a bit more interesting to play Zhongli, mainly that you can actually just drop his ult and then move on, as opposed to having to drop his Meteor and then do the hold skill. Some people might find a bit of value in a faster rotation with Zhongli. I personally don't care. I will still use Zhongli's ult anyway. So at that point, to me, C2 Zhongli is not even remotely necessary either. So that's kind of a thing. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Let me know what all of this in the comments below. How do you feel about Tartaglia and Zhongli these days? Especially because they have existed pretty much since the start of the game almost. It does make it a bit more difficult increasingly to recommend these characters when you have so many other alternatives to play. But again, considering that Tartaglia does have that incredible quadratic scaling shenanigans that doesn't seem to be beat by any other character even now, I think he's less power crept in the sense that he probably isn't really that power crept. He is still maintaining that position as the Hydra character in one of the strongest teams in the game in the form of International. Zhongli on the other hand, there are more shield characters to play, which does make it increasingly more difficult to recommend him specifically, but he is the biggest shield, I think, and he is also, you know, he's still really, really cool. As always, if you like the dude, get him. If you don't like the dude, then, you know, it gets more difficult to recommend getting them, and especially for the Tartaglia and Zhongli, that's where it gets more, you know, increasingly difficult for me to say, yeah, you should totally get them or not. They're not bad, but I'm less confident in saying, yeah, you should totally get Tartaglia over, let's say, Nilou, for example. Mainly because I find Nilou to be absolutely hilarious. Anyway, that's pretty much it though. I hope you guys enjoy this. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action, and until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
I will have order.
Make yourselves at home.
Things are about to get dicey. Gotcha.
Shine down. Hold the line.
One with wind and cloud.
Gotcha. Here comes the catch.
Riptide. Who's next?
Good riddance, cruel world.
No time to lose.
Not possible.
Teamwork is dreamwork.
As one with wind and cloud.
Eat this. Luba, get them.
You can run, but you can't hide. I can't. Again. Bring it on.